Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are here to talk to you about recommendations for virtual events. So before we get started, we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. So my name's Courtney James. I use she, her, and her pronouns, and I serve as the Director for Student Involvement at DePaul University in Chicago.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rigo. I use he, him, his pronouns. I also work at the Office of Student Involvement, and I am the coordinator for campus activities.
So today, one of the things that obviously DePaul, as many other universities around the country, has been doing is we've been diving headfirst into virtual engagement and virtual programming. So today we wanted to take some time to talk about some of the lessons that we've learned, things that would have worked well for us, and really we're hoping that you learn from our bumps along the way to improve your campus experience for your students wherever you might be. So to get us started here, one of the first things that we would share is, like many people, back in March when we moved to our virtual environment, we spent a lot of time thinking about what our initial pivot looked like. So before we started anything else, we created essentially a strategic plan, if you will, or at least a direction for us to follow to guide what we were going to do. So what we decided to do was, in lieu of just throwing things at a dartboard and hoping that they worked, we back in March decided that we were going to focus in 4 core components, and those four core components were social media engagement, reimagine traditional student activities, series programming, and then virtual gatherings of students. So what's been interesting for us is, while we decided this back in March, right as we were initially pivoting, when you look at some of our events that we're going to talk about here today, what we really found was what we actually stuck to these design principles and design ideas in an effective way. So the first here being social media engagement. So we decided early on we were going to create activations that promoted engagement from students at home. So that might have, back in March, we were envisioning that it might look like things like a DePaul Pet Day or theme days, or different things of that regard. And then we also were planning to share information about other organized virtual experiences. Especially early on in the pandemic, there were a lot of great national experiences and offerings, and we wanted to make sure that our students had access to those and were well aware of what was out there. Our second bucket here was really reimagine traditional student activities. Obviously, being in the Office of Student Involvement, this is something that we typically in an in-person environment lean really heavily into. So coffee houses, open mics, bingo nights, demonstrations, all of those things. We really wanted to make sure that we were taking the time to think about how could we reimagine what that looked like in a virtual environment. Then series programming. Series programming for a lot of colleges is really a staple of what they do. It's creating that week in, week out engagement, and using that interest and that cohort, if you will, to engage students in a really intentional and meaningful way. And then the fourth bucket that we really wanted to think about was virtual gatherings of students. So these were experiences that what we wanted to make sure that we did was that we were giving resources to our students and student groups that were so that they could take those resources and gather on their own. So we wanted to think about, like, what could that potentially look like? So like I said, while this was probably, I think, a concept, Rigo, if I'm right, I think we came up with this idea in like week 1 or week 2 of working from home. And it's been, like I said, it's been interesting because it really was a guiding principle, I think, that helped us determine how we were going to head forward into our virtual programming experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going right along with that, we have some examples of some things that have worked effectively, worked well for us. So in my capacity, just to give a little bit of context, I work with our programming board on campus. And I also assist with general campus activities that are coordinated through the office. And so obviously, with the pandemic and going virtual, a lot of it had to be trial and error, but we were happy to see that a lot of what we did worked well. some things maybe didn't work well in their initial format, but then we had to reimagine what that could look like. And so starting out with like the series programmings and real-time events, some of our most successful programs have been things that you would normally have on campus. And so our bingo series is something that we launched right away after going virtual, as well as our trivia series through our programming board. And both of those are events that have continued to see very steady success from the start. And there hasn't really been too big of a shift in terms of attendance at those events, which is we're very happy to see that. Students continue to show up to those, that they've built this affinity and connection with the programs that we're offering. And so the bingo series is something that we do every other week. And we were very intentional in theming the prizes for those, for that bingo event around something that could be branded, like DePaul branded specifically, because we still want to be able to remind people, hey, like you are a Blue Demon, like this is your school, this is your community, this is something that is important to you. And so we were very intentional in making sure that, yes, like bingo is a very general activity, but still finding ways to help students find the connection with the campus was very important. And then for our trivia series, we have a student host who's actually our programming board president, who is very lively, is able to like build that student connection. It's an event where people not only show up to play trivia, but it's also an event where people will come, show up to have conversation and be in that social atmosphere. And so that's been really exciting to see that students are still looking for the opportunity to participate in some sort of activity where they're not just passive participants, but also are able to connect with other students. In terms of dropships, obviously a lot of traditional campus activities will involve some sort of like giveaway or promotion, or sometimes you just need a supply to distribute that ties along with a program that you're doing. And so we saw a lot of success with a couple of events that I'll talk about later, but dropshipping is working through a company that can offer services that will individually ship things to students. And so it really takes the pressure off of having somebody from your office staff or your programming board coordinate all those efforts, and using a third-party vendor to be able to facilitate those. And so we were able to sort of create a list of, create a sign up and provide vendors with a list of items to ship to be able to have some successful programs. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Social media hunts have also been really exciting, or social media engagement. And so a really big example out of our office is, so there's something called the Dibs emoji. Dibs is our mascot. And over the past couple of years, we've actually built this whole campaign around turning him into a Dibs emoji. And so we were really creative. Our team put our heads together, and every Thursday, which is Blue Thursday, where we encourage students to wear blue. I'm wearing blue today, even though it's not Thursday. We hid different Dibs emojis within like pictures from campus events. And so students were like really excited every week to see things posted on our story on Instagram. And they had to figure out how many Dibs emojis were in the picture. So it was kind of like a "Where's Waldo?" but type of more connecting to our campus mascot. Live streams and timed videos. So initially, when we would bring on performers for, like, let's say like our poetry, we tried a couple Tunes at Noon events where we booked musical artists. We had those events take place on a Zoom call. What we later found out, though, was that our engagement for those type of like live streams or performance type events work very differently, because if you're not able to necessarily tap into everybody's schedule when you initially host an event, streaming it on your social media, and really building promotion around people watching the broadcast on social media has really increased our engagement, because they're able to watch it on demand. And so while you may have an artist that only has about 30, 40 people, and when you initially when the initial performance takes place, you're able to make sure that that lives on your programming board or your office social media, and your engagement. You know, if you track the viewership over the span of a week, it's a lot higher than what you'll initially see. And so we thought that was really cool. It's more having a focus on programming on demand.
Yeah, so we wanted to take some time to flesh out these four things, these four concepts, if you will, that worked really well for us, and give some real examples and some lessons that we learned from some of them. So first, talking about those, you know, those live, in-person, real-time experiences. One of the very first things that we did was actually our virtual dance marathon. So prior to the start of quarantine, our students had been working, you know, for almost a year to plan our dance marathon event. And when we had to turn to a virtual environment, they still wanted to continue it. So, you know, there are a number of different schools throughout the country who turned to virtual dance marathons. But I think that there were a lot of concepts that we learned from this event that were really important, that helped us steer things moving forward. First, one of the first things that we did during this event was we created almost a minute-by-minute schedule of activities and events that were going to happen throughout the entire thing. So we outlined for 7 minutes, this was going to be the activity that was taking place, and this is who was going to be the host, and this is the student who had control of the screen. And mapping those concepts and that timeline and that event schedule was really critical for a smooth event that day. The other thing that we decided to do early on with this was we hired a host. So this was a time that our students were first leaning into virtual programming, and our students had a lot of nerves around their ability to host an event, which we were planning to have for 2 hours, you know. So what we decided to do was we hired an associate member through NACA, the National Association of Campus Activities, to serve as that host. And really what we told him was that his role was to help through the awkward. So he had a copy of our run of show as well. But when students were, you know, trying to figure out how to move from that one event to the next, he was there, and he was there to kind of guide in that transition. And it became a really important element of the event because it was a continuity and a congruence that wouldn't have otherwise existed. You don't always have to hire an external vendor for that, but I do think it's important to think about, is there a person in your event, particularly if it's something that is going to be a longer period of time, but is there a person or a host who can guide you through that experience and really, again, help through that awkward, because it was a really important part of DEMONTHON's success for that day.
So another really exciting thing that we did this past spring quarter is we hosted a graduation ceremony for our graduate students that were completing their graduate coursework. And so what we really liked about this program was the formality of it, the ceremonial aspect of it, that sense of still being able to carry on a powerful campus tradition even through Zoom. And so a big lesson that we learned with a program like this was that you can still create an experience that is very customizable and very tailored to your specific audience. And so for this specific event, we had a full-on script that our office wrote so it was like an actual program. It wasn't just like a hangout. It was formatted, structured. We made sure to personalize it to the students that were graduating and made sure that there were references specifically to work that they completed, or maybe like stories, anecdotes within the script. We invited our Vice President of Student Affairs, our Associate Vice President, and other university staff to participate as well. So kind of giving it that sense of still being something large scale and special and important is something that is a key takeaway that we've learned from an event like this graduation ceremony for our seniors, which was a very meaningful event that turned out really phenomenal. So I think it surprised. I mean, personally, I was surprised at how you're still able to tap into like the emotions and the connection even virtually, because obviously when you try something like this, you just never know how it's going to work, because something like a graduation ceremony is very intimate, very special in person, but I think we were still able to pull off something that was meaningful for all those students.
Yeah, and Rigo, I think the other important part of this, there's these things called design design principles that people can use for events. And one of the design principles is symbolic rituals and rites of passage. And, I think that obviously students were so devastated when graduation ceremonies were canceled or postponed because they were losing that ceremonial rite of passage, right? They were losing this thing that, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people before them participated in. And one of the coolest things about this event was that it still gave that chance for someone to have that personalized feeling of that rite of passage. As you're watching this, you're probably planning for fall events, and you might be like, why are you talking about graduation? That's not something that happens until spring. Like, we're trying to still figure out fall. Well, fall still has a lot of important rituals and rites of passage, right? So thinking about like these concepts that Rigo talked about here, I think could be really, really important in applying them to fall welcomes and on-campus experiences. Like, does your student organization have a thing that you do every fall, and how can you virtualize that experience? Or, does your class take on a pledge? Like, are there things like that you can do to create that experience? And clearly, as you can tell from the picture here, we asked everyone to wear their graduation regalia. And honestly, I was shocked that everybody showed up in it, including our staff. But I think doing those little things in preparation for it can really make a really big difference too. So heading into our next thing, one of the things that our office oversees at DePaul is our esports and gaming program. So a lot of people assumed from the get-go that gaming and esports would have a easy transition to virtual. We had somewhat of a hiccup, but eventually we figured out our stride and really leaned into it and started doing more and more gaming and esports events. So the big picture concept of what we did was we implemented something called the DePaul Gaming League. So essentially weekly, we had a variety of different games that students could participate in. So we alternated between PC and console-based games. And for our PC games, we rotated between things like League of Legends, Rocket League, and Valorant. Then for our console-based games, we rotated between Smash, Mario Kart, and then actually did some Animal Crossing events. And this is really spectacular because, first of all, our gaming events are really spectacular because, first of all, they already have the platform built in to be successful for these different types of experiences. So, if it's a console game, particularly a Nintendo-based game, Nintendo Online has all of those systems in place that will allow for you to successfully host an event. Then for PC games, again, all of those are meant for online competition. So we were able to really lean into that and start new and different things. We did a combination of both homegrown and outsourced programs as well. What we oftentimes partnered was we outsourced a program and had like a big launch for it, like this Animal Crossing event. We utilized an external vendor for our first event, but then we followed it up with a number of homegrown events. So we used that first big launch to build our community and gain interest, and then we turned the community to we created a space in our Discord community to continue conversations moving forward.
Going back into that example that I referred to earlier, do you all hear some background noise? Okay. So going back to that example that I talked about earlier, so for the drop shipping, one of our most successful events was we had the dips emoji that I was talking about earlier. We had a pillow party, and so we drop shipped about 400 pillows. And so when the marketing was released for this event, we promoted it. We collected all the addresses that where students preferred for this to be shipped. And then we had an event the week of where everybody came together and stuffed the pillow together. And there were different activities that we offered. Like we did a DePaul trivia. We played a couple of other activities, just like fun games, and it was like a come and go type of event. But there was that sense of like you still get a promotional item or something that is a tie-in to your university, and also still able to come together with other students and enjoy that. And so it was a really cool event. Caused a lot of excitement. We actually had 400 signups within like the first two days or so. So that was really great to see. And then another event that involved the dropshipping component, but also an in-person or a synchronous component, was our Canvas painting social. And so we worked with one of another NACA vendor to get dropshipped or to dropship Canvas supplies, paint, brushes, and still be able to have an event that you normally see in person, which is like those guided painting courses or classes, and still offer it virtually. And so we shipped out the materials about 3 weeks prior to the event, and then on a designated day, students logged in at the same time on Zoom and followed along. And that was also a really fun event, just to see everybody come together and be excited about being able to still participate in a really fun event that, when you imagine virtual programming, you imagine just like staring at your computer screen, but this one was something that was very hands-on, and they got to be crafty and creative, and it was a really great event to see.
Yeah, and so those two events that Rigo talked about were very much offered in a what we call a synchronous manner, right? So they were in real time. The core of the experience happened because you were in a Zoom room with other people. But we also wanted to try something a little bit different. So we ran an asynchronous event called Tie-Dye with OSI. So what this means, asynchronous is as you may know from your classes, asynchronous is when it's not necessarily happening in real time, but you have all of the information and resources you need and can do it on your own time. So as Rigo talked about, those first two events, we utilized external vendors to coordinate the mailings and everything, which was really, really great. But we also wanted to see like what was the commitment, time commitment for us to do something in OSI. So we came up with this concept to tie-dye, really for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to still, do a traditional T-shirt giveaway in our office. But also tie-dye is actually something that we can't normally do on campus. We're not allowed to do it in the grassy areas or anything else because our university has some concerns about dyeing the grass. But we tried it for this event, for tie-dye with OSI. We opened up a form in our campus management system, and students were able to tell us their size T-shirt. And then we printed white T-shirts or a white screen print on a white T-shirt. And then we mailed all of those T-shirts to students with one bottle of blue dye because our university colors are blue and white. And to supplement that, we also had one of our student staff create a video that showed all of the different ways that people could turn and twist the T-shirt so that they could dye it to their specifications. So we ended up mailing out around 175 T-shirts. And right before I went on our YouTube channel to check how many views we had of the video, and we had around 100, or at that time we had 157. So we're pretty close to the number of people who have watched the video to the number of people that actually did the T-shirts. So again, since this was asynchronous, it wasn't necessarily in real time, but what we asked the participants to do instead was to tag us in their social media. So it was also this cool way for DePaul students and community members to generate DePaul related content in their own time, right? They didn't have to necessarily do it at that exact minute, but we just asked that they do it, they post a picture of it to their social media whenever they were done with it. So again, it was a great way to try something different, to try that asynchronous event. And then do that drop ship component as well. So then Rigo talked
the other thing
go ahead, Rigo.
The other thing I would add about that tie-dye event is the video that you mentioned of Grace giving the instructions of how to tie it in different ways. I think that that created a really cool personal element, because then there's like a face, a student face to this event, and it's not just like we're shipping out all these t-shirts and paint. It made it more personal, and I thought that was a really nice. It was creative because it was a good way to deliver the instructions and the information, but also add that personal touch on something that wasn't like, not everybody had to like log in at the same time to do the tie-dye.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about that entire event was I was talking to our Student Government Association president. Her name's Giselle. And Giselle was like, you know, tie-dye's really in right now. And it's like, okay, cool. we're on trend, I guess, right now. So that third bucket that Rigo overviewed a little bit earlier were social media hunts. So he talked a little bit about the DIBS emoji hunt that we're currently doing this summer. That actually started as a concept from our an event that we did previously called our virtual GNOME hunt. So when we are traditionally in person, we do an event called the GNOME hunt, where we hide 100 little 6 or 7 inch gnomes all over campus for students to find and then win prize packs. Well, when we turned to our virtual environment, we kind of threw it out as a joke, like, what if we did a virtual GNOME hunt? And then we were like, wait, we really could do it. So what it was exactly what Rigo explained. We put these pictures of campus life and campus experiences, and then students would go through them in almost a Where's Waldo type fashion and find the different
sound. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep. Can you hear me? Oh, Rigo might be having some issues right now. So we very much had, or we would hide things in an image, and students would tell us how many images they would find. So this is one of those examples. So if you can see my mouse scrolling over it right now. So this is a picture from one of our traditional campus events, the Loot Block Party. And you know, when at first glance, you might be like, oh, okay, that's a cool picture. But then when you start to really get into it, you start to see little gnomes hidden throughout it. So there's one here, there's one here at the top, another one in the middle here, and then I think one here. I am not the best person when it comes to finding all of these, so there might even be more. But it's been a great way for us to engage our students via social media. So for this one in particular, we also had a supplement where, because the in-person event allowed for people to decorate gnomes, we also had a component where we had offices decorate gnomes to share in their social media. So we had 48 different students, departments, and organizations design unique gnomes and tell stories for them. And then in this specific week, we reached over 2,200 students, had over 3,600 impressions on Instagram. And because we did an image like this each and every day, we had over 600 students guess how many images or how many things were hidden in these pictures. So it was really, really spectacular engagement. And we ended up mailing a t-shirt as a prize, but it was a great way for us to engage with our students. So we'll head to the next slide here. Rigo, is your sound back on?
I think I've like lost my, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
All right, so I can't hear Courtney very well, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about this event. This is called the Virtual Campfire. And so very early on, our students want to be able to, so originally there was a campfire themed event that was supposed to happen on campus. And so very early on, students wanted to really convert that event to something that could happen virtually. And so it started out as something that seemed like a bit of a stretch, but it actually ended up being a really cool program. It had different elements tied into it. So there was a scary story contest that we had submissions for. So there was a call out on our social media for students to be able to submit their written story, which would then be, we'd select 2 to 3 stories for students to be able to come on and perform the stories at this virtual campfire. And then we also tapped into one of our student bands that was supposed to perform at our end of the year concert, Modern Nun. They were still, wanting to perform and work with us. And so we were able to find an opportunity to showcase them during this event. And so we were really intentional about making sure that we had the theme and that, there was like an actual campfire displayed on the screen, that it wasn't just like, people coming on and saying like random scary stories and then like a performance. We made sure that, the atmosphere and the tone was set on the screen. And so even little things like having, as you can see here, the background image is an actual campfire. Having things like that and really going, that extra mile to still honor the theme was really important. And it was something that, I think as of now, we have over 1,000 views on this video. So that's really cool to know that students are engaging, interacting with it. And it was an event that turned out really well. And just something that I think honestly was really creative on behalf of the students that coordinated it. It came really well. It came together really well.
Yeah, and I think that this is really one of those ways, Rigo, that we started turning into those, like live streamed and recorded video sessions. Because I think that we had made some assumptions early on that, because we do so many things in person on campus in real time, that we should mirror content delivery when we turn to our online format. And that really wasn't the case. I think like this model really helped us to continue engagement and to meet students where they are and meet them at a time that works for them, and to allow them to engage with content in a way that was convenient for them. So another example of how we did that, did do that and are continuing to do it, is actually through a program we're doing called Career Chats through our esports program. So with this series, what we're doing is weekly at 6:30 on Wednesday nights, we do a live stream from our esports Facebook and Twitch accounts. So we schedule that live experience with one of our student workers, Alex, who's in the small picture here, and then a different industry expert to talk about why they entered the field, what they had to learn along the way, and then just make some recommendations for our DePaul students as well. So the way that we do this is through a service called StreamYard, which actually we're using the platform right now to record this session as well. But the StreamYard has the capability to either record or do a live stream, and it just elevates how it can look dramatically. So the great part about it too, if I can show here for a second, you can show different comments. So if we were live streaming right now and if somebody asked a question, we would be able to show that comment on the screen. But you can also have banners pop up between. So I just put obviously our social media handle here, DPU involvement. So it's a really great way that you can do it. You can change layouts like this. You can, do a multitude of different ways and sessions for things to look. And you can change your brand. So you can change from, we've got this background right now. You can go to this. You can put all sorts of different things in the middle of this or while utilizing the platform. So it's a really great way to really elevate the look of your experience. One of the people I work with says that we are now in the content creation business, and that's something, particularly as student affairs practitioners, we never really got any training on whatsoever. But I would recommend looking into StreamYard, Restream, something like that to elevate what your look looks like, because it's just going to give you a much more polished way to present your information. So one of the other experiences that we changed from a live experience to recorded videos was actually our Exemplary Leadership Awards. So, like many schools around the country, DePaul has an annual Leadership Awards banquet. Typically happens in the fall and is usually about an hour and a half, 2-hour event. Well, when we moved to our virtual experience, virtual environment, we were planning to do a 2-hour live streamed video for our Exceptional Leadership Awards. And, I was sitting one day and I was like, there's just no way that students are going to watch 2.5 hour session. They're not going to sit and listen in that big of a chunk. So I suggested to our assistant director, Natalie, who oversees the program, I was like, instead of doing one 2.5-hour session. How about we break it down and we do videos by award? So instead of doing one 2.5-hour video, what we ended up doing was about 13 or 14 2 to 7 minute videos. And it was possibly one of the best choices that we had in how we shifted that program, because we went from, probably having maybe, a couple hundred students watch it if they were willing to commit to a 2.5-hour video, to having over 9,000 views in a week. And that was really substantial for us. But then the other cool part about it was because we broke it down by award, we saw this really great engagement, especially when we posted it on Instagram, of students tagging each other and saying, like, you're in this video, like, you won an award, like, congrats. And it was this like shout out culture and this this recognition and acknowledgement that we weren't really planning for, but it was a really cool byproduct of how we ended up delivering this. So there was a lot of value in shifting that experience from one recorded session or one live session to this video style series. It also alleviated a lot of pressure for us as a staff. There's a lot of anxiety and pressure, and even as you've seen right now, like Rigo and I are recording this video in real time. I had to take my headphones off at one point because there was background noise. Rigo's tech dropped. But when you plan and schedule recorded videos, you can just control it a lot differently. And if you mess up, you can hit pause, restart, and then control the content in how you roll it out. So it's a great way to consider. You should definitely consider, like, if you are planning a long event, particularly one that has a lot of information, how can you parse it out so that students can consistently go back to it? So those are a little bit about some of our events. We also wanted to share a little bit of what we've learned from marketing. So one of the decisions that we made early on was we knew that there were going to be a lot of different places that people were going to try and put information. Right? When we are normally in person, there are 100 different things competing for attention or competing for our students' attention. So what we decided to do was to create what we called the DEN, which is the Digital Engagement Network. And it is in our student organization content management system. It is custom branded to be called D-Hub, but it's managed by campus groups. Well, there is a feature in campus group software that when you create an event, you can designate a co-host to that event. So what we asked was every single person who was going to do any virtual offering that was open or focused on students, we asked them to select the DEN as a co-host to that event. So what we were able to do with that is we created a one-stop shop where students could find any information about any online offerings. So they knew that if they were going and looking at the DEN, it was absolutely something that was going to be available to them online. So the other great part about it was because it was through our content management system, our students had to opt into it. So we knew that the audience that we were building for this virtual community was extremely interested because they said, yes, I want to get this information. So because we used this strategy, we were able to promote 513 different event offerings since March 20th. And only about 20 of those were organized by OSI. The rest came from different campus partners and different parts of the university who were offering experiences to students. We had over 700 people opt in. So we had a really great base for students that were interested in attending and participating in virtual events. The other thing that was convenient for particularly students and student groups that were planning things was that our campus group system connects with everything else at the university. So students knew that if they put their information into the DEN and put it in through the appropriate system, it was going to automatically route to all of these different things. So it went to the university calendar. It went to the daily email blast that the university sends out to. We also took it a step further and created a weekly email blast that specifically talked about virtual offerings. So all of those students were participating in that and they were getting that information. And again, they got to self-select into it. So we knew that they wanted to see it in front of them. So it's been a really great resource for us to have this consistent story And then when people start, now that we're heading into the fall, people are starting to ask like, well, where is this information going to live? Well, we have this whole system set up in the DEN already. And this is something that I think could work potentially really well with student organizations too. You know, like as you're thinking about your campus and your community, how can you leverage a content management system that you may have to create this consistent place for students to find information about virtual offerings? So we just wanted to share, as we end here and wrap up our time, wanted to share a little bit about our plan moving forward. So DePaul currently is planning to have a in-person experience, albeit it will be highly reduced, but we're still planning to have an in-person experience come fall. So in thinking about our ratio, we are planning to do about 25% of our activities in person, while 75% are going to be virtual. And really, we landed on that percentage because that is the current breakdown of how many classes are going to be in person to online. So about a quarter of our classes are going to be in person. So we're going to do about a quarter of our events in person. And then the other 75% we are going to continue to do online. And then for these virtual offerings, we're really going to lean upon some of the principles that we shared here that worked well for us to guide us into the future. You know, thinking about things like how do we structure events? How do we create a schedule for them? Those dropship principles, social media engagement, how do we leverage live streaming? All of those things I think are really, really important lessons that we've learned along the way that are going to really help DePaul elevate our programming as we move forward. And then finally, I think one of the things that we did that was most helpful was we worked with some of the local and national vendors that we frequently connect with to create something that we call the Social Distance Showcase. So for one Thursday one Thursday morning, I should say, from about 9 a.m. to noon, we had vendors give us 15-minute presentations to tell us what services they could provide, either with an emphasis on virtual offerings, or if they had the ability to do a physically distant in-person event. So we told them, look, we're DePaul, and this is what we're looking for specifically. So we appreciate the email blast, but these are the things that we're specifically looking to check our boxes. And the thing that was really great was, you know, we have relationships with a lot of these vendors, so they custom tailored presentations that helped us check our boxes. So now as we're building that schedule, we know, you know, we can look at this type of experience because one of our vendors shared that, you know, this seems like something that your students might be interested in. So that was really, really helpful for us in planning as we move forward. So that's all of the information that we have prepared for you here today. And here's our contact information. But Rigo, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts here before we kind of wrap up our recorded part of the session.
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I did not plug in NACA as a resource, because I know you mentioned the virtual showcase. And so if you're not able to coordinate something like that for your campus specifically, NACA is having 2 virtual experiences in the fall where there will be a showcase component. And so that just comes in very helpful to have your students participate in that, because as they continue to create programs, it's good to be able to have that personal relationship with the agencies that are offering these services. And so that is like one thing that I will plug, is that there's so many resources available through NACA right now. There's a lot of Facebook groups, a lot of things being posted on the NACA website and uploaded on Encore, which is like a database of content that is useful for campus activities. And so that's the one thing that I'll plug at the end, is be resourceful. And really reach out and don't be afraid to ask other campuses what they're doing, because I think we've really taken a lot from that.
Yeah, this has been the time, I think, more so than ever before. Like, if I see a campus that's doing something exceedingly well, I start following them on social media. Like, because everybody's got different event listings and all of this. I'm taking screenshots and like, oh, wow, that was a really cool, unique idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other ones that I found really, really helpful, like Rigo said, in social media, there's the Facebook community that's specifically really helpful. It's called the Virtual Event Ideas Group. So it was coordinated by Jason Lavasser, but I think it's up to like 4,500 people or something. And it really does remind you that like you're not alone in this. You know, like this is an issue that a lot of different campuses around the country are thinking about and dealing with. So it's a great place where you can go and see what have people already thought about. What if you haven't thought about it yet, it might give you like, here's the next thing to think about too. But it's been a really helpful place to start to connect some of those dots.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Well, great. Well, if anyone has any follow-up questions, again, we'll put our contact information back up here at the end. But best of luck as you start planning for the fall with your virtual endeavors. And if there's anything that we at DePaul can do to help you, feel free to let us know.
Thank you.